On the night of April 1st, 2006, a 27-year-old medical student walked into a crowded bar in Columbus, Ohio. Security cameras recorded him entering the building. Hours later, those same cameras recorded hundreds of people leaving, but Brian Shaffer was never seen leaving. More than 15 years later, investigators still cannot explain how a man walked into a building filled with cameras and simply disappeared. And in the years since that night, no evidence has ever explained where he went. Brian Shaffer was a second-year medical student at Ohio State University. Friends described him as intelligent, funny, and outgoing. He had recently gone through a difficult time. Only a few weeks earlier, his mother had died after a long battle with cancer. The loss had hit him hard, but those close to him said he was trying to move forward. Brian was close with his father and his younger brother, and despite the grief, he had plans for the future. He was preparing for an upcoming vacation to Miami with his girlfriend. Spring break was only days away. On that Saturday evening, Brian decided to go out with friends to take a break from studying and clear his head. Around 9 p.m., Brian met his friend William Clint Florence. The two decided to start the evening with dinner before heading out to bars near Ohio State's campus. Later that night, they met another friend, Meredith Reed. Together, the three eventually made their way to a popular bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. The bar was located inside a large entertainment complex called the South Campus Gateway. To reach the bar, visitors had to take an escalator up from the street level and walk through a corridor leading to the entrance. A security camera was positioned outside the bar, capturing everyone who entered or exited that hallway. At approximately 1:15 a.m., the camera recorded Brian Shaffer entering the hallway with Clint and Meredith. The footage shows the three walking toward the entrance of the bar. This moment would become one of the last confirmed times Brian was seen on camera that night. Inside, the bar was crowded and loud. Like many bars near a college campus, the atmosphere was chaotic but ordinary. Friends talked, people danced, drinks were served, and the night continued like any other weekend. At some point during the evening, Brian separated briefly from Clint and Meredith. According to Meredith, Brian began talking with two women he had just met. She later said they seemed to be having a casual conversation near the entrance area. Security footage later showed Brian briefly stepping outside the bar into the hallway area where the camera was located. In the footage, he can be seen speaking with the two women near the entrance. After a short conversation, Brian turned and walked back into the bar. This moment would become the last confirmed time Brian Shaffer was ever seen on camera. Around closing time, at approximately 2 a.m., the bar began to empty. Security cameras continued recording people leaving the hallway outside the bar. Groups of students passed through the frame. Couples walked out together. Friends stumbled down the escalator toward the street. Clint and Meredith eventually left the bar as well. When they reached the street, they realized Brian was no longer with them. At first, they assumed he had stayed inside talking with the two women or had left with someone else. They tried calling his phone, but he didn't answer. The calls went straight to voicemail. What investigators discovered the next day made the situation far more disturbing. When police reviewed the security footage from the building, they saw Brian entering the hallway outside the Ugly Tuna Saloona. They saw him approach the bar entrance. They even saw him briefly outside the bar speaking with the two women before walking back inside. But when they watched hours of footage showing people leaving the same hallway, Brian never appeared. Investigators reviewed the footage again and again. People walked out in groups. People walked out alone. Some returned briefly for forgotten jackets. Others lingered near the escalator before heading down to the street. Hundreds of people exited the bar that night. But Brian Shaffer never appeared in any of those frames. Investigators immediately began searching for explanations. One possibility was that Brian had left through another exit that was not covered by the cameras. The Ugly Tuna Saloona had a service exit used by employees. This door led to a construction area within the building. At the time, parts of the complex were still under renovation. If Brian had somehow gone through that door, it might have allowed him to leave the building without passing the main camera. However, police examined that possibility carefully. The service exit was not meant for customers, and employees later said they did not remember Brian going through it. Another theory was that Brian might have remained inside the bar after closing and left later when the cameras were no longer recording, but this also seemed unlikely. Staff members said everyone had been cleared out when the bar closed. No one reported seeing Brian staying behind. Meanwhile, Brian's family quickly realized something was wrong. When he failed to return home the next day, his father contacted friends and eventually the police. Brian had not shown up for work. He had not contacted his girlfriend. His phone had stopped responding. Everything about his disappearance seemed completely out of character. One of the most puzzling details emerged when investigators looked at Brian's phone records. The day after he vanished, his phone suddenly rang when his girlfriend tried to call him. Instead of going straight to voicemail like before, the call actually connected for a moment, but no one answered. Then the phone disconnected again. The signal was never detected again after that moment. Police began a large search effort across Columbus. Officers checked nearby streets, parking garages, and construction areas. They searched dumpsters and vacant buildings. The Olentangy River, which runs through the city, was also examined in case Brian had accidentally fallen in while walking home. Despite these efforts, no trace of him was found. Over time, investigators explored several different possibilities. One theory suggested that Brian had somehow left the bar through the construction area and encountered foul play outside. Another possibility was that he had voluntarily disappeared, choosing to start a new life somewhere else. But those who knew Brian strongly rejected that idea. He had left behind his car, his belongings, and his entire future. Only days later, he was supposed to travel to Miami with his girlfriend. There was no evidence he had planned to disappear. Attention also turned to the two women Brian had been talking to shortly before closing time. Police interviewed them and confirmed their identities. According to their statements, Brian seemed normal and friendly. Eventually, the women left the bar separately and did not know what happened to him afterward. Investigators found no evidence linking them to his disappearance. Another detail that later attracted attention involved Brian's friend Clint Florence. At one point during the investigation, Clint declined further police interviews and hired an attorney. Authorities have never publicly named him as a suspect, and hiring a lawyer does not imply guilt. However, the decision added another layer of mystery to an already confusing case. Another detail that complicated the investigation was the layout of the building itself. The South Campus Gateway complex contained multiple exits, stairwells, and unfinished areas due to ongoing construction. Some investigators believe Brian may have accidentally entered a restricted part of the building, but extensive searches over the years have never uncovered any sign that he died inside the structure. As the months passed, the case began attracting national attention. Media outlets across the United States reported on the strange disappearance of a man who appeared to vanish from a building full of cameras. Internet forums and amateur investigators began examining the security footage frame by frame, searching for clues. Some people suggested that Brian might actually appear in the footage leaving the building, but that investigators missed him due to crowd congestion. However, police have repeatedly stated that they carefully reviewed the recordings and did not find any confirmed footage of him leaving. One of the most debated theories is that Brian simply left through an exit not visible to the cameras. If he did, something may have happened to him outside the building where no surveillance existed. This explanation may sound simple, but it raises another question. If Brian left normally, why did none of his friends see him? Why didn't he answer his phone? And why has no credible sighting of him ever been confirmed since that night? Over the years, Brian's father continued searching for answers. He frequently spoke to the media and urged anyone with information to come forward. The family struggled with the uncertainty that surrounds many missing persons cases. Without evidence of what happened, every possibility remained open. Tragically, in 2008, Brian's father died in an accident after being struck by a falling tree during a storm. He never learned what happened to his son. Despite the passage of time, investigators have never closed the case. Brian Shaffer is still officially listed as a missing person. Age-progressed images have been released showing what he might look like today. Tips occasionally arrive, but none have led to a definitive answer. The mystery continues to capture attention because of one simple, unsettling fact. Brian Shaffer was seen entering a bar that night. Cameras recorded him walking toward the entrance with friends. They even captured him briefly stepping outside and then returning to the bar. But when the same cameras recorded everyone leaving the building, he was not among them. Somewhere between walking back into that bar and the end of the night, Brian Shaffer disappeared. In many missing person cases, investigators can identify the last place someone was seen. But in Brian's case, the location is known with unusual precision. The cameras show the exact hallway. They show the exact moment he walked in. What they never show is how he left, and that question remains unanswered. What do you think happened to Brian Shaffer that night? Did he somehow leave the building without being seen? Or did something happen inside the bar that was never discovered? If you have your own theory about this case, share it in the comments below. And if you're interested in more unsolved mysteries like this one, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.